The Abduction and Manipulation of Humans Using Advanced Technology. By Valdemar Valerian. Excerpted from Matrix 2. From The Dulce Book by Branton. Introduction. In July 1947, the radar at the Four Corners area in the southwestern United States affected and took down an alien disk. It was entirely by accident. As a result of the electromagnetic beams, upon which the radar system was based, interfering with the systems of the craft. Branton. The disk landed near Roswell, New Mexico. It was to be the first of two disks that would crash in that area. On board, scientists and military personnel found several dead aliens beings. And immediate analysis of their species could not be determined, but the aliens referred to as the Aben had both reptilian and insect-like qualities. Also on board were found the remains of several military personnel. As far as we knew, this was the first major indication that human beings were being taken by an alien species. In December 1988, former Navy intelligence officer William Cooper interviewed a man who said, "I don't know everything, but it's way out of our control. To tell you the truth, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. Giant underground shelters are being built under Groom Lake and other places." In reference to the claim by some that these aliens are harvesting humans on planet Earth for their genetic, bioplasmic and secretional properties, Valerian states, "There is no doubt that the government policy of secrecy makes the harvests easier for the Greys. Governments, by definition, are supposed to protect the public welfare. Obviously, something went very wrong here, and it appears that the Nazi SS intelligence-based CIA had a lot to do with it." Note: the CIA was reputedly established by Bavarian Illuminati representative Alan Dulce in collaboration with Bavarian Thule Society representative Nazi SS General Reinhard Gehlen. The CIA/NSA, working on behalf of the corporate socialists in America who, according to Anthony Sutton and other economists, financed the Bolshevik and Nazi revolutions, in turn infiltrated the industrial military system and in turn the largely unelected/appointed executive branch of the United States government via their coup d'etat of the executive branch, which occurred simultaneously with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Since Kennedy's death, most if not all of the United States presidents have been members of global financial organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderbergers. All of which do not honor Americans' Declaration of Independence but instead advocate a New World Order to be implemented with the assistance of a United Nations military force. Branton. These malevolent aliens have allied themselves with the secret world government whose thirst for power and system survival is probably only unequaled by the malevolent aliens themselves. The malevolent aliens have given advanced technology to the government, manipulated, lied to, deceived, and generally used our secret government for their selfish and inhumane alien ends. An alien base in Nevada. The continuing situation with regard to MP, a 20-year-old woman in Las Vegas, has brought many interesting factors to the fore. Her first abduction occurred when she was 5 years old in December 1975. She has experienced over 400 abductions since that time, an average of 2 a month. Around 1987, she found that she was able to retain more and more memory of the activities. She is also an excellent artist with a photographic memory. There is sufficient evidence that she has been on various craft and she has also been taken to underground facilities in the mountains in Arizona and under the desert near Paradox, Nevada. The Nevada facility is located near the Paradox area. She was also brought to this facility in 1987. The facility is not as large as the one in Arizona. Riken programming devices were used on her in attempts at programming. The facility is generally described as one oriented toward genetic work. Large cylinders containing amber, pink, and light blue fluids were noted. These cylinders appear to be similar to those detailed in Matrix 2. All cylinders contained humanoid forms. The cylinders containing light blue fluid contained forms that look human. The others contained hybrid/genetic variant humanoids. The last time she was brought to this facility was on January 22, 1991, where they attempted to get her to agree to not revealing data, as the Sirians were aware of her detailed interaction with us. She refused. The Sirians said something to the extent that she was affecting the balance in the Confederation. If that is so, then we were certainly all for it. Note: these are probably humanoids from Sirius B, who have formerly collaborated with the reptiloids/Greys of Draconis Orion. Although many Sirians continue to collaborate with the Orionite forces who have commandeered their collective Other Sirians seem to have been experiencing a major conversion to the Andromedan Pleiadian Federation's non-interventionist policies, now that many of their former treaties with the reptiloids/Greys are falling apart because of betrayals on the Reptilian side. A huge armada from Sirius B is supposed to arrive in the Sol system around 2004 to engage the Orion Draconian forces, which have since taken full control of many of the Sirians' former joint operational bases throughout this system. As with the Nazi element on Earth, there are apparently agents from Sirius B who still wish to maintain collaboration with the reptiloids. If not for the fact that they are operating under near total mind control, then for the fact that they see a joint effort between the elite power cults of Sirius, Bavaria and Orion as the only means to carry out their totalitarian plans for planet Earth on behalf of their supposed astral ascended master leaders, especially in the face of Federation opposition. This may be what was meant in regards to the balance in the Confederation. Branton. Upon her return she discovered that she had some pain on the right side of her abdomen. At this facility, she saw Sirians, Greys, and in another part of the facility she saw what appeared to be the United States military members. There were other beings there that she described as light beings. Light does not always make right, Branton. Her description of them was that they had a humanoid form, but there were no details in the form. It just emitted a light. In view of the current state of knowledge, it is thought that these were beings of at least 5th density. The beings hovered around and monitored the Sirians and Greys all during her stay at the facility. The human military at the facility wore black uniforms. Information on the Greys. The United States executive branch, not the congressional branch of government, made one or more agreements with a species described as the Tall Greys, and has agreed not to interfere with alien operational plans and trade for technology. Agreements made in 1934, 1954, 1964, and 1972. The Grey clones are performing biological work which necessitates the termination of various species on the surface of the Earth, which is not governed or protected under the treaty made with the United States government. Underground installations are the only sovereign areas under the treaty. Researchers will recall that the disk that crashed in 1947 at Roswell, New Mexico had several reptilian species on board, as well as the body parts and clothing of several Army Air Force officers. Species objectives appear to be founded on a rigid domination survival-based social order, where their religion is science, their social structure is geared to obedience and duty, their military concepts are grouped around conquest, colonization, and domination through covert mind control programs. Their basic game appears to be to use nullification and domination to control the leaders of various targeted civilizations. They accomplish this by taking out the leaders and replacing them with entities they can control. The function of the elite humans, as far as the Greys are concerned, are to decimate portions of the human population so that the remainder can be easily controlled. Hitler is a prime example. Apparent social structure. One byproduct of their social memory complex is that any kind of decision takes a while to make, since none of the Grey clones seem to have the innate ability to act independently of the other clone species. This social structure has no room for surprises, and the best laid plans of mice and men can be totally wrecked if it comes into contact with anything outside its operational context. The tall Greys seem to be less prone to the frailties of the system than do the smaller Greys. Grey strategies and operations. The Earth is somewhat unique in that it is a broad spectrum of beings of several density levels and race types. It is inhabited inside, outside, and in the atmosphere in thousands of hidden little pockets and time stream projections. The process of conquering a planet involves the location of beings that vibrate in resonance with their vibrational frequency. These located beings are then told that they are the elite or chosen ones who will conquer and lead the human race and rule the world for their Grey masters. Often the located beings are physically taken aboard craft and given physical examinations, provided with implants, given accelerated data through inculcation methods that will help them serve the Greys. The function of an elite is to decimate portions of its own race in an effort to reduce populations to manageable limits so the remainder can be easily controlled. The Nazi Jew scenario is a good example of the Grey modus operandi. They also controlled the Japanese Empire and are generally responsible for most aggression between human groupings on the planet. The Greys use divide and conquer tactics. Although it should be mentioned that since WWII and the cessation of the alliance with Bavaria, the Japanese have been interacting more and more with the cold Asians, a relatively benevolent humanoid race that reportedly inhabits the alternate antimatter universe, and who apparently maintain close ties with the Andropleiadine Federation. Branton. Humans have generally been deceived into playing victim games of negativity, self-limitation, self-denigration and destruction. The games that the Greys are trying to enforce are games of coversion and secrets, as well as hidden standards. All activities are conducted on a playing field which is limited by the attention span and the scope of awareness of the players. Grey military operations include colonization of unprotected civilizations which are unaligned with any other group in space. They use planets for supply depots, slave sources, and biological materials. The exercise of domination and the enslavement of planetary populations is expressed as service to self as opposed to service to others. It creates power for their group, but inherent in this process is a rapid dissipation of power in that civilization, due to the limitations imposed by the games of limitation and negativity enforced on the popularity. According to what research has revealed, there are certain methods and plans that have underscored the literal invasion of Earth by various Orion-based species. Typical scenarios might be, the target planet is timetabled for invasion. The base station is moved within range. Disguised as asteroids, planetoids, or comets but recognized as alien craft by minor course alterations that can and have been detected, for instance in regards to the asteroid Geographos, Phobos, Hale-Bopp, etc. Branton. Leaders are approached with population control programs or solutions to survival-related problems. Leaders are convinced that they represent an elite group that has been chosen by God to rule the populace for the good of God's empire. In many cases, however, the elite do not believe in any God other than themselves. Branton. Look at any theocratic or religiocratic country on Earth and you can see this. Apparent reasons for Orion-based operations, in accordance with service to self philosophy, goals are sought that will achieve more power for the elite or ruling class. It is important that more and more slaves be made, so that the psychic energy can be drawn off to feed the madness of the power elite. Domination and nullification is the basis of the game of struggle and conquest. It is a stable datum to negative Orion-based groups that empires can only be built and maintained on the backs of broken game pieces, and oiled by the blood, sweat, and tears of worthless entities too decayed to be useful for any other tasks and too rebellious to trust in more cooperative ventures. Primary physical characteristics of the Greys. The larger Greys apparently have some vestigial reproductive capability, and some of the hybrid species that have been crossbreed with the taller reptilian species have full reproductive capability. The brain capacity is estimated to be between 2,500 and 3,500 cc, compared to 1,300 cc for the average human. Due to the cloning process, the neural matter is artificially grown brain matter, and the Greys have known technology that enables them to insert memory patterns and consciousness into clones less than JavaScript. Getpage Valdemar_Valerian_78.htm single quote 650,454 greater than in any manner or pattern that they wish. The Greys consume nourishment through a process of absorption through their skin. The process, according to abductees who have witnessed it, involved spreading a biological slurry mixture that has been mixed with hydrogen peroxide which oxygenates the slurry and eliminates bacteria onto their skin. Waste products are then excreted back through the skin. Many abductees have noted that the Greys have a distinct series of odors. The larger Greys have a more pronounced nose. According to some government sources, these extraterrestrial biological entities called themselves the Ebon. It is with the larger Greys that elements of the government made a series of diplomatic agreements in the 1950s, 60s and 70s. Note, other sources say that the agreements made between the Scottish Rite faction of government date back at least to 1933 to 34 and possibly earlier in regards to the native subterranean reptilian species. The large Greys are apparently crossbreeds between the tall, lizard-like Sirian bipeds and the smaller, Grey-type Sirian bipeds. Although the treaty was initiated with the tall Greys, the very fact that a reptilian hierarchy exists, small Greys working for taller reptiloids, explains why the shorter Greys have also been seen working with government officials. Branton. Reproduction processes of the Greys. Innumerable witnesses have confirmed the presence of underground facilities that the Greys use for breeding. These facilities, of which Dulce is the most famous, provide for genetic work of all descriptions. Humans are brought to these facilities on a continuing basis in order to provide a genetic pool from which to extract DNA and mixtures that will contribute toward the efforts of the gray species to strengthen their genetic structure. Biological materials and animal mutilations. In some cases, humans are killed and tossed into the vats, the slurry mixture mentioned above. In 2 cases, dead humans have been seen floating in vats right next to the body parts of cattle. Human mutilations appear to be less obvious than cattle mutilations, although both still continue to this day. According to Don Ecker, the Justice Department is making a concerted effort to keep the human mutilations out of the media. Branton. Researcher beaten up by MIP/CIA, May 1990. Researcher Jefferson Sousa, Vegan, Homo contactee, arrived at a UFO conference in May of 1990 bearing information that included data about which corporations were producing helicopters with gravity assist, as well as information about their use in cattle mutilations. 4 men appearing like classical MIB men in black, took the documents, and threw him back on a plane to New York. It may well be that CIA/Delta/NRO involvement in the mutilations might be more significant than supposed. One report has stated that in the forests of Los Alamos, New Mexico, witnesses have observed nightly caravans of cattle trucks entering a particular mountainous area known for its unusual and alien Amerindian pictographs. These caravans reportedly arrive following or preceding overflights of dozens of UFOs. When the cattle caravans left the area, they were reportedly empty. Is the government trying to appease the huge nest of greys that reportedly operate below the Los Alamos region? This sounds hauntingly familiar to the ancient legend of St. George, who delivered the inhabitants of Sirian, Libya from a fierce dragon who was in the habit of terrorizing the city. The king of Sirian ordered the residents to offer their sheep and cattle to the beast in order to appease it. After all the livestock were depleted, the king ordered the inhabitants to draw lots, and he or she on whom the lot fell would be that day's sacrifice to appease the monster. One day the king's own daughter drew the lot, and with great anguish he allowed the guards to take her to the post outside the city. When the dragon approached to take his prey, a white horse with a silver-clad knight quickly approached. He brandished a sword and a long spear, as well as a shield with a red cross emblazoned on a white background. The Christian knight made quick work of the beast before the worm knew what had hit him, and delivered the city from this reptilian scourge. Whether the story is true or allegory, the message is clear. Eventually the time comes when one must cease from trying to appease the enemy, and by the grace of God Almighty go forth and destroy it. Branton? Now the question remains as to why the government would be carrying out or participating in this large-scale cattle mutilation program. Whose interests are being served? Breeding facilities under Dulce. Pictures in the Dulce labs portraying wombs with little fetuses and the clear tubs with little aliens in them are believed to portray the cloned worker class of beings that are pictured on the cover of Communion. The tall greys are the dominant species and are basically test tube species. The clones are synthetically produced with biological materials, much of which owe their source to life forms on Earth. The brain of the greys has been described as having many more lobes than the human brain. There have been previous references to crystalline networks that have been found in the brains of some of the alien autopsies. It is believed that the network has a functional relationship to telepathic communication and acts as a function in what is essentially a hive mind. Each of the grey clones has an individuality, but it is much less pronounced than in the human, where tendencies toward expanded awareness and shared consciousness are minimized through cultural conditioning, programming, and basic cranial differences in structure. Physiological characteristics of some grey reptilian species. Autopsied by United States government. Alien life form, term used by the government to describe the greys in terms of being a malevolent life form. The deal with the greys is that their field around their body is different to ours to the point where merging of the fields ends up creating physical symptoms, the body terror mentioned by people like Whitley Strieber. The field around them is in direct opposition to ours. It is an anti-life field, as these specific species are on a devolutionary spiral. They are akin to soldiers of fortune, and offer their advanced technology and trade for things they require. They're experts at manipulation of both the human body through manipulation of the fields and the human mind. They require blood and other biological fluids to survive. They abduct humans and animals in order to acquire these fluids. They implant small devices near the brain which potentially gives them total control and monitoring capability. These devices are very difficult to detect. The analysis of the devices by technical staff has produced a description that involves use of crystalline technology combined with molecular circuitry, and these ride on the resonant emissions of the brain and the various fields of the human. Information is untrained on the brain waves. It appears that all attempts to remove the implants 1972 have resulted in the death of the human. This is usually due in part to the fact that the implants are attached to major nerve centers, and once attached the nerve tissues grow in and around the implant, essentially making the implant a part of the nervous system. When relatively unsophisticated medical procedures are used in an attempt to remove the implants, major nerve centers are damaged as a result, causing severe injury or even death. Branton. Various descriptions of the ALFs relate the following characteristics: between 3 to 3.5 feet in height, erect standing biped, small thin build, head larger than humans, absence of auditory lobes external, absence of body hair, large tear-shaped eyes slanted approximately 35 degrees, which are opaque black with vertical slit pupils, arms resembling praying mantis, normal attitude which reach to the knees, long hands with small palm, claw-like fingers, various number of digits, often 2 short digits and 2 long, but some species have 3 or 4 fingers, tough gray skin which is reptilian in texture, small feet with 4 small claw-like toes, organs that are similar to human organs but have obviously developed according to a different mutational process. A non-functioning digestive system. 2 separate brains. Movement is deliberate, slow and precise. Alien subsistence requires that they must have human blood and other biological substances to survive. Other indications suggest that originally they did not require human blood, but once having used human blood for this purpose they have since acquired a racial addiction to this vital substance. This goes far beyond just mere physical hunger, since the greys/reptiloids tend to feed off the human life energies resident within human blood plasma, in what may be considered a vampirial type of hunger for human vital fluids. Branton. In extreme circumstances they can subsist on other cattle animal fluids. Food is converted to energy by chlorophyll by a photosynthetic process. This supports results gained from autopsies at 29 Palms underground base, where it was seen that their blood was greenish and the tissue was black. Waste products are secreted through the skin. The 2 separate brains are separated by midcranial lateral bone, anterior and posterior brain. There is no apparent connection between the 2. Some autopsies have revealed a crystalline network which is thought to have a function in telepathic and other functions which help to maintain the group consciousness between members of the same species. Functions of group consciousness in this species does have a disadvantage in that decisions in this species come rather slowly as the matter at hand filters through the group awareness to those who must make a decision. The Greys and the Reptilians. From an anonymous abductee. This initial report is concerned with 2 groups of aliens, Greys and Reptilians. There are several different kinds of both Greys and Reptilians, but for now I will simply refer to them as single groups. Both groups live on this planet or beneath its surface and in space. They have been here for a long time. The Greys are also working for Reptilians, relative to the abductee as an individual and to the human race as a whole. They have been used by the Reptilians as the middlemen, doing the work and exposing themselves to us on behalf of and instead of the Reptilians. Although reptilian-based, the Sirian Greys are less visibly so, which is why they have been chosen to interface with abductees. Branton. The Greys are consistently referred to as a mercenary force. Some Reptilians eat humans like we eat chicken. In the United States, there are rumors of great, underground food storage rooms full of preserved human bodies. Sometimes the rumor has it that the bodies are those of children. I asked the Greys why, if this was true, would it be children? I was told that it is not only children but also adults that Reptilians eat. Children are preferred because they are generally unpoisoned by substances like caffeine, nicotine, alcohol and other things adults are saturated with, as a group. The Reptilians seem to have little regard for us as living beings. They think that we are as ugly and repulsive to them as we ever portrayed them to be, and that we, the human race, are as valuable as weeds. However, they do seem to consider some of us valuable property. One gets the feeling they will continue to use us as they see fit, or, if we ever become a real problem as a group, they would sooner wipe us out than deal with it. They do not fear us, considering themselves far superior to us by all comparisons. They supposedly consider the surface of this planet to be a poisonous, inhospitable environment and allow us to live here as livestock. Branton, since they live below the surface and in space. We and our surface environment function as a physical buffer or living shield around their home underground. Note, some sources claim that many of the Greys and reptiloids are moving en masse to massive underground centers below major human cities for the sole purpose of having a human shield in order to protect themselves from Earth-penetrating weapons which their Andromedan, Pleiadian or other enemies might otherwise use to destroy them. This would also provide them with a ready source of human biological material for whatever purpose they require. Branton? Socially and culturally, Greys and humans are very different. They fear us because they know we are potentially powerful beings. However, they insist that they own us. They say they created us, lie. Branton, and therefore have the right to do what they will with us. Beyond this original right to interfere with us, they say they have additionally earned the right through their control. Because they can control us on an individual and cultural basis both physically and mentally, they say they own us. These attitudes are propaganda. Their control over us in any capacity is ultimately very frail due to its very nature. Depends on us not knowing that we are being controlled, Branton. Their control is based on intimidation and advanced technology. As we become more aware, we are harder to control, harder to lie to, harder to confuse. Our technology would definitely be competitive to theirs if we had access to it. Much of the technology we would need to effectively overcome this situation exists now within the alien-manipulated military-industrial establishment which is part of the secret or corporate government technocracy, Branton. It just isn't made available to the public, for economic reasons, as well as national security. The preceding statements about the Greys are based on conversations with them and long observation of them. Impressions about the Reptilians are more general. I have not engaged in conversations with the taller Reptilians, though they have sometimes spoken to me. Most of my experience with them does not include direct communication between me and them. Almost all of my consciously recalled memories of Reptilians also include Greys, who usually do the communicating between us. Often the Reptilians seem to be present during abductions as observers only, standing off to the side of the action, just watching. The Greys and the Bavarian Thule Society. The Greys were ultimately behind the Bavarian Gnostic Thule group in Germany during the war, and no doubt were ultimately behind German policy of internment and termination of the Jews during the war. Think of the emotion that was generated in the concentration camps. Note, reptiloids and Greys feed off of negative emotions like fear via a type of osmosis. Joint operational underground bases maintained by the Reptiloids/Greys reportedly exist beneath Germany as they did beneath the United States. Branton? The Pasturing and Use of Surface Earth Humans. By Jason Bishop III. Most UFO buffs think that their efforts will lead to some sensible attention by the authorities to the broad problem that UFOs present. The problem of are they invaders? What do they want here on Earth? And all those other nagging questions. They come to Earth for things surface people don't even know about. Earth is on the ancient space trade routes. They come to bases, cavern city complexes, and they mine, manufacture, and do some genetic manipulations to form various subservient crossbreeds. The Reptilians, for the most part, we are dealing with another species that is humanoid in shape, but reptilian in heritage. Their leader elite are the Draco. They even have special wings, which are flaps of skin, supported by long ribs. These can be folded back against the body. They are also known as the dragon race, and their symbology usually includes the winged serpent. There are elements of their species which do not have wings, the soldier class of the species and scientists. They are all cold-blooded and have to have a balanced environment to maintain body temperature. The soldier class of the species can bury themselves in the ground and wait long periods of time in order to ambush their enemy. If need be, they can survive on one very large meal every few weeks or even once a year when hibernating or in suspended animation. As a species, they are well suited for space travel due to their ability to hibernate. These reptoids have scales which protect them from moisture loss. They have no sweat glands. The scales, scutes, are much larger on their backs, making the skin waterproof. The scales elsewhere on the body are more flexible. They have 3 fingers with an opposing thumb. The eyes are cat-like and large. They have twin nostrils at the end of a short stubby muzzle. They are mostly meat-eaters. The mouth is more like a slit, lipless, but they have teeth which are differentiated into incisors, canines, and molars. They average from 6 to 7 feet in height. The reptilian, amphibian, humanoids have been interacting with Earth for ages. Many contactees and abductees repeatedly describe an insignia of a flying serpent on a shoulder patch, a badge, a medallion or a helmet. The serpent race lives under the ground. The Greys, the reptilian species, directs the efforts of the worker class, which are about 4 feet tall. These are currently referred to as Greys or Ibs, and are the largest category likely to be encountered by surface humans. These beings, the Greys, operate very efficiently in the dark. Their eyes are more sensitive to ultraviolet light. They have the ability to control their heart rate. The normal heart rate for a Grey is above that of a human. The skin seems to have a metallic content and an unusual cobalt pigmentation. Many have no external sex organs. Some have been bred to have them. Note, most reptiloids that have been encountered have been described as having no exterior sex organs. However, on a few occasions reptiloids have been described as having external sex organs. In nearly every case that I have heard of where these reptiloids were encountered, the abductee was a female human who was forcibly raped by the reptilian within an underground base, or even within their own homes during the abduction encounter. Branton? There are accounts in the legends of Babylon, India, Egypt, South America, Central America and elsewhere that reveal the influence of this other species on our own. One variety of reptilian crossbreed is particularly negative and dangerous. This variety, who work with the Draco, do not eat in the same way humans do. These hive-like beings use synthetically produced substances, mixed with blood. Thus slurry is sometimes mixed with hydrogen peroxide, which kills the foreign bacteria and viruses. They may also be feeding off the life essence energy of the substances. They also seem to feed off nuclear energy, and have manipulated humans into developing sources of nuclear power that emit radiation. Nuclear methods involve use of neutrons to create radiation. Methods that use positrons emit no radiation. The Greys, the short, big heads, are mercenaries. They interface with humans in secret societies and within the military/governmental complex. An interconnected web manipulates the surface Earth cultures. Command progression: Draco, winged reptilian, -- greater than Draco, non-winged, white, brown, green-skinned, etc. -- greater than Greys, -- greater than humans. Collaborators. Underground bases and way stations. The caverns beneath Calvert, Texas are being used for some type of operations. Farmers and ranchers in the area have reported hearing peculiar noises coming from deep beneath their feet. Individuals living 5 or 6 miles outside Calvert have been repeatedly driven out of their homes by the sound of generators. In April 1973, students camping in the San Gabriel Mountains on the western edge of the Mojave Desert felt uneasy and then saw a giant man-like creature. Researchers from the UFO Research Institute were called in. They discovered the sound of geared machinery and what might be compared to a hydroelectric plant coming from beneath the forest floor. Sounds of operating machinery have been recorded coming from mines in the area after midnight. The Yakima Indian Reservation, southeast of Tacoma, Washington, is the Yakima Indian Reservation. Of special interest is one particular section 40 miles wide and 70 miles long, bordered on the west by the Cascade Mountain Range. It is an area of canyons and heavily forested regions. The valley is essentially closed to the public and special permits are required to enter. Forestry personnel have heard Dorothy's term unusual sounds for years coming from underground. One area of intense activity is known as Topinish Ridge. From deep within the dark, restricted canyons, glows have been seen. This area is not accessible by foot or vehicle. Low-flying silver cigar-shaped craft have been seen to disappear into the deep canyon known as the Middle Fork of Topinish Creek.